Hello, and welcome to an introduction to fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, part 3, supporting communication and cognitive and auditory processing. My name is Eric Marier, and I am a transitional services facilitator at Surrey Place in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. On our agenda for this video, we'll cover how fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, what we call FASD, may affect communication, how FASD may affect cognitive and auditory processing, and finally, how we can help in both these areas. As a result of this session, participants will be informed of how communication skills and cognitive and auditory processing may be affected by FASD. Active in identifying a child or a youth's strengths in these two areas, and engage with a child or youth with collaborative strategies to support communication and cognitive and auditory processing. So the first performance area we'll talk about today is communication. And communication is sending or receiving information. Someone with a diagnosis of FASD may have difficulty with understanding instructions, understanding the meaning of words, even when they themselves appear to be highly skilled verbally. And sometimes they may agree to something that they didn't understand in the first place, and then they're not able to follow through. And that might be because they didn't understand or process the instruction properly. Like we did in our other video modules, we'll take some time right now to update our strengths inventory for our child or youth in the area of communication. So take a moment right now, or maybe after the video, to write down one or more strengths that your child may have in the area of communication. It could be that they have an interest too that requires a certain skill in communication. You may have a child who has difficulty understanding instructions, but on the other hand, might be a great storyteller, might be a person who can deliver a joke really well, captivate audiences, might be a great public speaker, right? So those are all strengths, and some of these might be interests that your child may have. So if your child or your youth has difficulty with communications, there are certain things you can do to help them. One thing is when we're communicating new information, new instructions, we want to use simple language. As well, we want to use pauses in between bits of information, in between steps for a multiple step instruction, right? So if we give an instruction that has more than one step, like pick up your coat and put on your shoes, that's two things we're asking. That's two steps. So one thing you can consider is putting a pause between those two steps, right? So pick up your shoes, pausing. And it may take them a while for them to process that instruction. You may have to repeat yourself, and we would do that very generously and in a positive tone. And then once they picked up their shoes, then we deliver that second step, right? Put on your coat. As well, when we're giving new pieces of information, we may want to put pauses in between those different bits, right? So they're able to process one bit of that piece of information, and then we move on to the other bit of information. Maybe that's part of a larger idea that we're trying to get across to them. And ask them to show you or to say back in their own words what you just told them or what you may have asked of them. Our next performance area is cognitive and auditory processing. This may also be affected by FASD. Cognitive processing is taking in information and transforming it, storing it, recovering it, and putting it to work. Auditory processing is taking in sound through the ear and having it travel to the language area of the brain to be interpreted, right? So you would hear a word or an instruction that someone gave you. Those are words that you hear, goes through your ear, and then that gets translated in the language area of your brain. It's given some kind of meaning that's relevant to you, and now you've understood what that other person has told you, what that other person has asked of you. For us, when we hear a word or we hear an instruction, for most for many people, that happens instantaneously, that traveling and then that understanding and turning those words into something meaningful for ourselves. For someone with FASD, that travel time might be a bit slower, right? That auditory processing might be a bit delayed. So someone with FASD may be slow to answer, right? When we ask them a question or we ask them for a piece of information, they may need to process that information first before they're able to give you an answer. So they might be very slow to answer in some cases. Or sometimes they might give any answer right away just to save face. Like I said before in our other video modules, our folks with FASD can be very, very socially aware. And, just like the rest of us, they want to fit in. And so sometimes they may not want to be quote unquote stupid. So and the expectation might be that they answer right away. So they might answer right away before they've even had time to process what was asked of them. And we've had kids sometimes at Surrey Place, in some of our groups there, sometimes they might jump down your throat, quote unquote, jump down your throat before they've understood what was really being asked of them. And then once they've processed the instruction, they might feel quite remorseful for getting angry at us in the first place. If that is occurring, that's someone who's overwhelmed, right? Who's being overloaded with a lot of information that they're not able to process at the speed that is expected of everyone else around them, right? Other times you may have a child or a youth that appears aloof or they're apathetic. It looks like they're being antisocial in certain situations, and that's not really the case. It could be, they're in a new environment. There's lots of new people in that environment. Maybe it's a Thanksgiving Day dinner at Aunt Sally's, and they've never really been to that house before, and now there's all these new people that they don't know. These new people have faces they've never seen before. They're using words they've never heard of before. They're doing things that they've never seen before. All these things, that's all information that the mind has to process. And when it's happening with multiple people in the same room, and there could be sensory concerns as well, loud noises, it's a lot for the brain to handle. So that person might need to step away from that situation. They might need to go to another room by themselves, stare at their phone for a while, or play with a portable video game. They're not being antisocial. They just need some time to themselves, a break from processing all this new information that's overwhelming them, that's overloading them. As well, just like in communication, sometimes they may misunderstand an instruction because they didn't process it properly before they responded, before they jump to complete the instruction. So you might give an instruction, and the expectation in your home is that the child follows that instruction right away. But the child with FASD might know that expectation, might jump to right away to respond to that instruction without having processed the instruction properly before they acted upon it. And so they'll follow through on the instruction improperly. So let's take another moment here to update our strengths inventory that we've been talking about, and we talked before in our part 2 video around the benefits of keeping a strengths inventory updated for your child. So in the area of cognitive and auditory processing, think of some strengths, that your child may have in that area. They may even have some interests that they're quite good at or skilled at that involve cognitive and auditory processing. So write that down and update your strengths inventory with that information. You can also do this at the end of our video today. Okay, so how can we help with this performance area? So of course, giving our folks, our loved ones, time to process is very important, right? So when we ask a question, waiting for them to process it, right? There might be some dead air, some silence between the two of you while the individual with FASD processes the information that you've just verbally given them. So we have to be comfortable with that silence. And we have to Let them know that it's okay for them to process information first, and then they can respond when they're ready. And you may need to repeat yourself. And again, we would repeat ourselves in a generous, positive, supportive tone. Be patient. Avoid rapid fire orders, right? So sometimes, we come home and the child hasn't taken out the garbage like they agreed to do. They haven't done their homework yet. The dishwasher is still full. And so we might start firing off all these orders. But that's just a whole bunch of steps all, mashed into one that they now have to follow through. They now have to process. They now have to tease apart the different steps, process that, and then act upon it. That could be very overwhelming for someone with FASD. So we want to be very aware when we're giving orders in a rapid fire manner that way. So be aware of overloading, be aware of overwhelming. Always have that in the back of your mind, when you're giving new information, when you're giving multiple steps instruction, right? Just be very, very aware that you might be filling up, that child's capacity. And so you want to just slow down and pace yourself, temper yourself in how you're delivering new information, in how you're delivering instructions. And really, we live in a very fast-paced world right now. All of us would benefit from slowing down and giving each and every one of us some pauses every once in a while, right? Having a calm environment in your home helps your child with FASD, helps your teen with FASD regulate as well, right? If everyone's jumping around and shouting rapid fire orders, and there's their brothers and sisters are also following through on all these different orders, and people being impatient, that could also add to the stress level of someone with FASD and can also overload and overwhelm them. So in our next module, we will cover supporting abstract thinking and executive functioning. In the meantime, please stay engaged, register for live events at mysurreyplace.ca, and view recorded events and resources at surreyplace.ca/resources. And please get involved, join our Family Connections group on Facebook by clicking on this link. And we welcome your feedback. Please take a moment to complete a brief survey to share your feedback with us. Scan this QR code or click on this link. Thank you, and please join me for our next video module, An Introduction to Fetal Alcohol Spectrum Disorder, Part 4, Supporting Abstract Thinking and Executive Functioning.